It was like a lot of people in the trade. It was a hobby. I was a collector first. I focused a lot on Southern Americana, Southern history, more specifically North Carolina history, and had this goal to collect as many early North Carolina imprints, books printed in North Carolina, as I could. And that journey led into a lot of different ways, a lot of different paths. And initially, I would buy and sell a few books from my personal collection. And as I wanted to buy more expensive ones, I thought, well, the best way to do that would be to buy something else that I didn't have an interest in that I could flip and then use the money to buy what I wanted. And like a lot of people in the trade, one begets another. So you buy one book, then it becomes 10, then it becomes 100, then 1,000. It just keeps multiplying like gremlins. It keeps multiplying.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rare Book Cafe, Coffee Break Edition. I'm your host today, Lee Linn with the Ridge Books in Calhoun, Georgia. My co-host Ed Markiewicz had a family issue to deal with this morning and will not be joining us. But our special guest today is an old friend of mine, Jim Crotts of Jim Crotts Rare Books in Clemens, North Carolina. Jim, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you, and we'll be excited to hear all about your journey into book selling this morning. I first met Jim probably around 2013. He was he had a job that he traveled a lot, and he called on a client here in Calhoun, and so that's how Bob and I got to know him. He would come to our house and thankfully buy books from us. And but he has transitioned into a full-time bookseller. It's going to be interesting to hear how that came about. And leading into that, if you have read the latest issue of Book Lovers Paradise magazine, and if you haven't, you need to. Ed Markiewicz wrote, the theme of it is the passion for books. And Ed wrote an article about how in his 50s, after a couple of different careers, including the military, he transitioned into what became a real passion in his life, and that was books collecting and book selling. And now he's going into book binding and repairs as well. But Jim's story is a little bit different, and it's going to be interesting, I think, to our listeners and viewers to hear how at a much younger age he became a full-time bookseller. Tell us a little bit about your journey into book selling, Jim.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to see you again, even if in a virtual world here. Yeah, so I kind of coming into books, I didn't really come into book selling initially with the idea of it being a business. It was like a lot of people in the trade. It was a hobby. I was a collector first. I focused a lot on Southern Americana, Southern history, more specifically North Carolina history, and had this goal to collect as many early North Carolina imprints, books printed in North Carolina, as I could. And that journey led into a lot of different ways, a lot of different paths. And initially, I would buy and sell a few books from my personal collection. And as I wanted to buy more expensive ones, I thought, well, the best way to do that would be to buy something else that I didn't have an interest in that I could flip and then use the money to buy what I wanted. And like a lot of people in the trade, one begets another. So you buy one book, then it becomes 10, then it becomes 100, then 1,000. It just keeps multiplying like gremlins. It keeps multiplying. And bought a few collections. And that was really kind of the part that kind of kickstarted For me, selling, I've never run an actual brick and mortar store. I get that question all the time. Do you have a store? And the answer to that is no. For the majority of the time, I was doing another career. So this was just kind of like my side hustle, my little hobby on the side. But I primarily got my start through the eBay selling platform, which, as most people know, is a very low barrier to entry. You can go on eBay and, as you probably know, can sell anything, of which rare books are something obviously that lend themselves well to that because you can actually ship those versus being a furniture dealer or something that's larger. And so that's really kind of how I got the start, sold a few here and there, and then it just kind of grew and grew. The idea to host my own website really only came to fruition about a year or 2 years ago. And that was just at the idea that I wanted to be able to establish a presence that was outside of the eBay platform. Nothing against eBay. Certainly, it's still where a lot of my sales come from and where most people probably have interacted with me. But I wanted to have something short of setting up an actual brick and mortar store, which is a step I don't foresee myself. I never say never, but I don't foresee myself doing. But I wanted to have somewhere where if I wanted to send someone to look at my finer material and to be able to tell a story and to be able to do more with it, that would be there. So jimcrottsrarebooks.com is where that is. And a lot of things are cross listed there, obviously on eBay, and then Abe Books is another platform that I use.
Right. Well, I remember when you were doing nothing but eBay.
Yeah.
I remember that very well. Your website is lovely, and I noticed that your focus is still on Southern,
Mhm.
and and another thing that a lot of us have noticed in the trade lately is more of an emphasis on ephemera.
Yes.
Um, I think there's been a new understanding of original source material, and that this stuff is not going to survive unless we protect it. And
Correct.
and it was interesting to see on your website a lot of documents and letters and things like that. And I think that's been a trend with a lot of us. I mean, we're still doing books, but as postage rises,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to ship a pamphlet than it is to ship a great
Absolutely.
thick book. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, have I have been doing for since 2020 some virtual book fairs, and that might be something that that would lend itself to your situation as well.
Yeah.
Getman's Virtual has one that opens tomorrow, actually,
Okay.
that I'm going to have some things on, and so that might be something to look into, because that way you do deal directly with the customers.
Sure.
It's not just a listing, but you can deal directly, and that makes such, like you said, you can't do that on eBay.
Yeah.
Well, but it's so much easier when you have a website. Um, you said you didn't think you would do a brick and mortar store. I don't think I would either. Do you
There are
have
so few, but that said, I absolutely love when I do find one. I know
right?
only a handful genuine antiquarian booksellers here in North Carolina that are all good friends of mine, and I love going into their shops and being able to browse and just I don't say the smell, but just
Right. Yes.
all of that, right?
Right.
But yeah, it is very, it ties you down, and as a parent to kids that are involved in a lot of stuff, I like the freedom and flexibility that bookselling allows me to be able to be really more of a full time. I joke a full time parent and a part time bookseller, but you get the idea.
Right.
I mean that, but I always say never. So I mean there's always an option that you could do an actual brick and mortar store. But as you know, a lot of the stuff that the antiquarian booksellers sell, I mean your customers literally are all over the country, if not all over the world.
Right.
The likelihood of them traipsing through Clemens, North Carolina on any given Tuesday, 12:30, I mean, it's pretty small, and so that's part of that reason. But that said, I absolutely have a mad amount of respect for those that are able to maintain brick and mortar store people can actually walk in and peruse. I think that's wonderful, and I think it does well to keep people interested in it because they can physically touch the things that they're not just on the internet.
Do you have, for example, you're familiar with my book room. It is open by appointment. If somebody wants to come and look at books, they can. Do you, you were talking earlier before we went online that you had storage that was a couple of miles away.
Yeah.
Do you have any way for people who wanted to come see your material to actually come and handle things, or?
Yeah, I do. And I set that up really on a, case by case, appointment.
Right.
I wouldn't say appointment only, but on a case by case basis. If it lends itself, sure. There are materials that I have here in my home office that I can make available. Most of the items that I have in storage, not all, but most are going to be more the bulk type things.
Right.
Books that are more modern, contemporary, still about the same subject matter, but maybe not as climate sensitive. If
Right.
you, the storage units are climate controlled. But what I generally do when someone reaches out for that is I try to get an idea of what it is they want to see, and I've found in the past that it has been way more helpful if those individuals let me know subject matter, or more specifically what they maybe see listed that they want to see, and
Right.
then I can very easily make that available because one of the disadvantages of not having a physical brick and mortar store, I don't have to organize in a way that is by subject matter. I can organize what book fits on that shelf. Now
Right.
that said, there are, even in storage, there are shelves that are dedicated to Civil War, or dedicated to, a collection, or dedicated to a subject matter. But it's not inherently set up that way that someone could just go and meander through and they go, oh, here's all my books on medieval art. No, they are literally all over 5 different units. And so that's why I don't know that I've ever had anyone actually go to the storage unit to look, because it would literally be it'd be like, when someone looks at your listings, online, and didn't use a single keyword search and just started scrolling. That would be the concept of what it would be like to go to storage unit.
Right.
If you keyword, you can obviously narrow that down to what is it you really wanted to see. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to that, and happy to do that. But it doesn't happen as often as I think it would. And again, that's just because in most cases, customers can literally be anywhere. You
Right. Right.
Shipped a book yesterday to Alaska. I mean, that person's obviously not going to come in and
No, they're not going to come in. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah. Though, Clemens is right there on interstate, and
It's not far. Yeah.
we actually spent the night in Clemens coming back from Civil War battlefields in Virginia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One time at a Holiday Inn, our boys were middle school age, I think.
Okay.
It was the smallest sofa bed that we had ever tried to get 2 kids on. I think it was maybe a twin size or something. But
That's
the
so
one
funny.
night we managed.
Yeah.
We were
In fact, I mean, obviously Clemens is where where I'm based, but I usually tell people Winston-Salem because most
right,
people have heard of Winston-Salem, and very few, unless you've actually traveled through here, have actually been to the village. It's actually a village
right.
of Clemens, and so yeah, it's interesting that.
Yeah, so I have that. So I actually have been up there, and if I have to do that again, I will come by.
We have a nicer Holiday Inn now, so
I'm
brand
sure.
new, so I'm sure it will be a
Yes,
bigger sofa bed if you
yes,
need
and I'm slightly pickier about where I stayed than I was then. Um, for young people who are, we have had, particularly leading up to the Florida show, we had several younger booksellers who were coming to the show for maybe their first, second, or third time, and some of them were still working full time at other jobs, but actually had a brick and mortar store that they had someone who ran.
that.
Do you have any advice for younger book lovers who would really like to get into this? Do they do like you did and start out with eBay and just build from there, or do you just take the plunge and
Well, I mean, I would certainly say follow your passion, and if books are your passion, and book selling, because you can have a love of books and not really want to be a bookseller.
Right.
But if you have a love of business and you have a love of connecting people to, in my case, is not just books but pieces of history, then follow that passion. I joke with folks, you're not probably going to ever become a millionaire doing this. There are very few that rise to that level, but it's not really, about, I mean, it really isn't about the money. It's not the motivator. You have to pay your bills and you have to, provide for your family. But you're not going to get, filthy rich doing this. Back to the earlier point, though, I would say that, the best way to really do this business right, and that's the way I've learned, is just to grow it organically. I've been a true believer of that in really any industry that you choose to go into. If you just suddenly buy something overnight and you have all the sudden the crushing debt on top of you, you're going to make mistakes. And I think every seller makes mistakes. I had a mutual friend of ours once tell me, he would look around and he had thousands of books because these were all my mistakes
Yeah.
because they haven't sold. I've had some of these for
Yeah.
15
I have
years.
some of them right here behind me right now.
Yeah, look around. So, and he, it was tongue in cheek, but the point is that, follow your passion. I would encourage folks, if there was a younger bookseller, I would say, a good way to get a start is find a niche that, maybe is underserved or that you can really get behind and you can make a name for yourself in. To just be a general bookseller, that's all well and good, but as you know, there are millions of books written about millions of different topics.
Right.
And certainly you can have a smorgasbord of subjects. I do now versus when I started. I was very narrow in what I would buy and sell. But for me, as I acquired collections, those collections had other things in them. And it was through discovery of listing some of those other things that, like, wow, okay, there are people that do buy books on, furniture or reference books and whatnot. And so I would say that, and you made a comment earlier about ephemera, and I think that's very spot on in the trade right now. That ephemera is a really hot thing, and I think a lot of that is because those really engaged collectors, most likely, if they're a collector of Andrew Jackson, they probably have the vast majority of, the more common Andrew Jackson books that you and I would come across in a
Right.
collection. But if it's a piece of ephemera, if it's something that's unique, that's a one-off, that has a certain provenance, those are the things that will attract their attention. And I think we're seeing a lot of that because it was so forgotten for so long. That said, as a bookseller, I will say it is one of the most challenging things to have to list, because a book, there's bibliographical information, there's all kinds of stuff at your fingertips. I can crank out a box of books in no time. You
Right.
hand me a box of pamphlets or a box of, unrecorded stuff, it's weeks. Uh,
Right.
because and it's that rabbit hole when you start digging into it. What is this? And I have backlogs of boxes of letters and documents, and because to be able to sell that, you have to provide a context of what it is, and you have
Right.
to be, in most cases, you have to be the originator of that content, that research. It's wonderful when you can buy it from someone else that has already done that for you. Then that's a huge help, right? And that there's definitely a value add to that. But when you're the one that is literally unearthed a document that hasn't seen the light of day for 100 years, and you're trying to figure out who that person was, I mean, it literally it's a lot of time
Yeah.
in
I
that. But
spent part of this last week doing exactly that for some things for this virtual show.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I guess to circle back, to any young booksellers out there, and I appreciate you considering me young. I feel older every
No,
day.
no.
That's very kind of you to point that out. But no, I would just, like I said, follow your passion. You're going to be most animated and excited about it if you love the subject matter. And for me, when I got into this, it was a love of at that point specifically North Carolina history, but really Southern history. I love Charleston. I love Georgia. I love all those areas, and find a subject matter that you're passionate about do your best to be a, I won't say a specialist, but an expert, or educate yourself on that, and just really try to like do the best you can there. And then the other stuff will kind of grow as you start to make contacts, as you start to to kind of get out there more. I don't know about you, but the first question whenever I tell someone I'm a full-time bookseller, if not the first question, maybe the second question I get asked, well, where do you get all your books? Where do you find this
Right,
material?
where do you find all that
I
stuff?
don't, and there's no short one answer. Oh, I stop off at, so no, I mean, they come in so many different ways. Early in my career, it was very much one off. I buy a book here, I buy a book there. And as I have progressed in this, it really comes down to really